The glass walls of the Sterling Global headquarters gleamed in the winter sun, the kind of building that announced its power without a single word. Inside, polished marble floors reflected rows of designer heels and expensive suits. Employees moved briskly, eyes fixed on their phones or files, every gesture rehearsed. Amid all that elegance, a janitor pushed a squeaky cart stacked with rags and disinfectants. His name tag read Luis. Luis had been invisible for almost a decade. People passed him by, tossing coffee cups in the bins he lined, stepping around him without a glance. But there was one person who always noticed him, a small boy with wide brown eyes, wearing a puffer jacket 2 sizes too big. The boy's name was Henry, and he was the only child of Miranda Sterling, the CEO of the Empire herself. Luis had first seen Henry 2 years ago, tugging at his nanny's hand near the executive elevator. The boy had dropped a toy car, a tiny, battered thing, and Luis had bent to pick it up. "You like cars?" Luis had asked quietly, holding it out. Henry had smiled. That had been their first interaction, and it became a pattern. Whenever Henry came to the building, a rare, but always unexpected day, he'd drift toward Luis, who would listen patiently to his stories about dinosaurs, space, or whatever held his 5-year-old imagination. Miranda Sterling had noticed, of course. Her eyes, steel gray and watchful, missed little. She'd been tolerating it until today. Luis was in the top floor hallway mopping when he heard the elevator ping. Henry darted out first, his small sneakers squeaking on marble. His nanny followed, struggling with shopping bags. "Luis." Henry beamed. "Look what I got." He held up a model rocket. Luis smiled, kneeling down. "That's amazing, Henry." "Saturn V?" Henry nodded. "Can we launch it here?" Luis chuckled. "Not inside, buddy. But maybe outside one day." Henry was mid-laugh when Miranda appeared. Her stilettos struck the floor like gavel hits. She wore a charcoal suit, her blonde hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked painful. "Henry," she said sharply, "come here." Henry froze, then slowly turned. Miranda's eyes flicked to Luis, who rose, mop in hand. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're not supposed to be near my son," she said, her voice low but razor sharp. The hallway went quiet. Even the nanny shifted nervously. Luis stood still, his heart pounding. He'd been spoken to harshly by executives before, but never like this. "Mama," he began. "Number." She raised a hand. "Your staff." "He's my son." "Thesa." She gestured at Henry, at the mop bucket, at everything. "A is inappropriate." Henry looked back and forth between them, confused. "Mom, Luis is nicer." Miranda cut him off. "Go with Clara," she ordered. The nanny took Henry's hand, but the boy resisted. Luis could have apologized and walked away. That's what any other janitor would have done. But he saw the fear in Henry's eyes, the flicker of shame that a 5-year-old should never feel, and something inside him shifted. With steady hands, he set the mop aside. "Mrs. Sterling," he said quietly, "with all respect, I'd never harm your child. All I do is treat him like a person. Maybe that's what he needs." The words hung in the air. Miranda's expression hardened. "Excuse me?" Luis swallowed. Children a broken bar. They know when someone sees them. "You're powerful, yes. But to Henry, you're just mom. And if you're too busy, he'll look for kindness wherever he finds it." Clara's eyes widened. Henry squeezed her hand, looking up at his mother. Miranda's jaw clenched. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This conversation is over. HR will speak with you." She turned sharply, heels clacking as she strode away, dragging Henry with her. Luis stood in the silence after, his hands trembling. He knew he'd probably lose his job. But something about the way Henry's small fingers had clung to Clara's hand and the pleading look he'd given told him it had been worth it. That night, Luis went home to his tiny apartment over a laundromat. His own son, Matteo, was asleep on the sofa, textbooks spread out. Matteo was 16 and already working evenings at a grocery store. Luis sat beside him and brushed a strand of hair off his forehead. He thought of Henry, of Miranda's words. He'd been in the country for 20 years. He'd cleaned offices, washed windows, driven cabs. He'd buried his wife 5 years ago. And through it all, he'd believed that simple kindness, holding a door, Returning a lost toy was worth something. But standing in that hallway, shamed for caring, he wondered if the world had changed. The next morning, an email from HR summoned him to a mandatory meeting. He read it on his cracked phone screen while tying his boots. Matteo noticed. "What's wrong?" Luis hesitated, then said, "Just work things." Matteo frowned. "Is it because of that little kid? I heard you mention him." Luis tried to smile. "Don't worry, hi Joe. Things work out." At the office, HR sat him in a glass-walled conference room. A young woman with nervous eyes read from a prepared statement about boundaries and appropriate staff-child interactions. Luis listened quietly, hands folded. When they finished, he said, "I understand. But I hope you understand too. I wasn't doing anything wrong." They gave him a warning but didn't fire him. Yet the air changed. Other janitors avoided his gaze. Employees whispered. He was now the man who'd crossed the CEO. 2 days later, a snowstorm hit the city. Miranda's meetings ran late, and the building emptied out except for skeleton staff. Luis worked overtime, salting the entrances, wiping melted snow from floors. Around 8 p.m., he heard a sound near the stairwell, a child's voice calling softly. He followed it and found Henry alone, sitting on the steps, hugging his knees. "Henry?" Luis crouched. "Where's your nanny?" Henry sniffled. "She went to get the car. Mum's still upstairs." "I got lost." Luis offered a hand. "Come on, let's go back." Henry hesitated, then climbed into Luis's arms without a word. The boy was shivering. Luis zipped up his own jacket around him and carried him to their lobby. Snow was blowing against the glass doors in white sheets. They were halfway across the marble when a voice thundered, "What are you doing?" Miranda came running, her hair loose, her coat unbuttoned. She looked different, not the immaculate CEO but a frantic mother. "Henry!" she gasped, kneeling to pull him from Luis's arms. "Are you okay?" Henry clung to her but turned back. "Luis found me. I was lost." Miranda's eyes darted to Luis. Something flickered there, gratitude, fear, confusion. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Thank you," she said finally, barely audible. Luis nodded. He was cold. Security guards hovered nearby, unsure. Miranda took Henry's hand and led him away without another word. That night, Miranda couldn't sleep. She sat in her penthouse living room, city lights glinting off the glass. Henry was safe in bed. She kept replaying the image of her son in the janitor's arms, how gently Luis had held him, how naturally Henry had trusted him. She remembered Luis's words in the hallway, "Children know when someone sees them." Miranda had built her empire by being hard. She'd grown up poor, clawed her way through Ivy League and mergers. But Henry, a broken bar. Henry was different, sensitive, lonely. The only time he truly seemed joyful in her office was when he was around that janitor. Over the next week, she noticed things. How Luis stayed late to shovel snow so no one slipped. How he cleaned without complaint. How he sometimes fixed things others ignored, a loose doorknob, a flickering light, with quiet skill. She also noticed Henry drawing pictures of rockets, cars, and a smiling man with a mop. One evening, Miranda came home early. Henry was on the floor building his rocket. "Can Luis come over?" he asked suddenly. Miranda blinked. "Why?" "I want to show him my rocket," Henry said. "He knows about space." Miranda hesitated. "Luis is very busy." Henry's shoulders slumped. "He's my friend." Miranda sat down, smoothing his hair. "Henry, a broken bar. You have friends at school. They don't listen like he does," Henry whispered. That night, Miranda emailed HR and asked for Luis's file. She learned he'd been employed for 9 years, no complaints, always punctual. A widower, a teenage son. A note from a supervisor mentioned he'd once saved a colleague from choking in the cafeteria. For the first time, Miranda wondered if she'd judged him unfairly. A few days later, she invited Luis to her office. He arrived in his uniform, nervous. She gestured to a chair. "Sit." He sat, hands clasped. She studied him for a long moment. "You've been here a long time," she said finally. "Yes, Mom, my son a broken bar talks about you. Louise hesitated. He's a bright kid. Miranda exhaled. I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. Louise blinked. You don't have toe number. I do. Her voice softened. I was a broken bar protecting him. But maybe I was protecting him from the wrong things. Silence settled between them. I want to do something for you, Miranda said. Your son Mateo, is it? Hey, how is he? Louise stiffened. Has a broken bar good. Works hard. What's his dream? Louise's throat tightened. He wants to be an engineer. College is expensive. Miranda tapped her pen. Send me his transcripts. Louise stared. Mom, just do it. She stood. And a broken bar. Thank you for being kind to Henry. Louise left her office in a daze. That night, he told Mateo what had happened. Mateo's eyes widened. Dada, broken bar. Do you think a broken bar? Louise shrugged, but hope flickered in his chest for the first time in years. Weeks passed. Henry and Louise's quiet friendship continued. Now with Miranda's blessing. Mateo received a scholarship from a private foundation for engineering school. Louise knew who was behind it. One spring afternoon, Miranda invited Louise and Mateo to her home for dinner. Henry was ecstatic. Over the meal, Miranda asked Louise about his life, about Mateo's dreams. Louise, shy at first, began to open up. He talked about his wife's kindness, about how he'd once wanted to be a teacher but had taken cleaning jobs to survive. Miranda listened, really listened, and for the first time, she didn't see him as the janitor. She saw a man who'd sacrificed everything for his son, who still believed in decency. After dessert, Henry showed them his rocket collection. When I grow up, I'm gonna build real ones, he announced. Mateo grinned. I'll help you design them. Miranda felt something shift inside her, a softening, a realization that her wealth and power meant little compared to this small moment of connection between four people from utterly different worlds. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Miranda still had deals to close, calls to take, a company to run. But she started coming home earlier. She started leaving her phone in another room at dinner. Henry began smiling more. And every time she saw Louise in the halls of Sterling Global, she nodded, not as a CEO to an employee but as one parent to another. Louise never forgot the moment in the hallway when she'd said, "You're not supposed to be near my son." And Miranda never forgot his answer. Both had been changed by it. Kindness had spoken louder than status. And for Henry, the lesson would last a lifetime. That sometimes the people society overlooks are the very ones who see you most clearly.